We are back, episode 5 of the Star Wars Newsnet Timeline Show. My name is Tyler, here with Brian. Brian,
What's going on,
still
guys?
hanging out
Still,
in one of our favorite years of the timeline. But
Yep.
before we get into it, please go ahead, check out the previous 4 episodes of the Timeline Show. Hit that like and subscribe button here because we're going to be talking everything on the Star Wars canon timeline. This show is designed to be just a quick breakdown of every canon story that comes across in Star Wars because Brian and I are just degenerate Star Wars fans that apparently have nothing better to do with our time
nothing better
than
or money.
read everything, canon. But I like to look at it as like, what else would we rather do with our time than
Right.
dive into the Star Wars canon stories? So, Brian, I know that you are pretty excited for tonight's episode. I say tonight's episode like it's going to be up later at some time tomorrow, but we're recording on Sunday night. So what are you most excited for tonight, sir?
I'm ready to talk about the Blade, man. Because we're going to be having a jam-packed episode this week. Because we're talking about a one-shot comic next on the timeline. We figured just kind of combine the next two into one. And so I'm looking forward to talking about the Blade. I just reread it again today. I've been plugging away at comics all day. I've read, like I was telling you before, I read 56 issues today, trying to get caught up. And I'm getting ready to start.
Just a little bit of light reading.
A little bit, yeah.
A little
Nothing
light,
serious. Yeah.
Nothing crazy. Just
nothing,
nice
nothing
56 issue day.
But I'm getting ready to start Dark Droids. So I'm one issue away from starting Dark Droids. And I'm not sure how I feel about it, but I guess we'll see when we get into it.
That's what I've heard everyone say is I'm not sure how I feel about this, but I guess I'm going to figure it out. I think that's what I've heard a lot of people say just in terms of it's okay, but like I'm not sure how I feel about it, but I'm still going to keep plugging away because it's good enough to keep doing. So
it's got to be better than that Screaming Citadel crossover they did with the Force vampires, and
it's so true.
It's got to be better than that. So.
Well, if you are listening to us on Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, please give us a nice little, 5-star review. Leave some comments in the chat, or leave some comments there of what you enjoy most about whatever we talk about today, what questions you have over the comics, Quest of the Jedi and the Blade comics. We'll address those in the next show. Please also, if you're on YouTube, hit that like and subscribe button. We want to keep pumping out more material for you here on the Star Wars News Net YouTube channel. But let's get into this one. So, Brian, if you want to put that infographic on the screen here for those of you who are watching on YouTube, we're talking about Quest of the Jedi first. The author of this one is Claudia Gray, who, if you are familiar with any of Claudia Gray's Star Wars work, you know that she is, I don't know if there was a Mount Rushmore of Star Wars authors, she's probably definitely cemented on there. And this takes place, of course, again in the High Republic Phase 2, year 382 BBY. It came out last April. And I'll be honest, Brian, I did not read this until this week. This is not one I was familiar with. So it's pretty fresh. And I'm actually really excited about it because I did not really hear much about this when it came out.
Yeah.
And it felt like it came and went. And so I just said, okay, I have a lot of other comics, a lot of other Star Wars stories I'm diving into right now. I don't need to read this one. I missed out. That one it's a banger. It's a banger. So this one follows at the very beginning Aslan Rel, who is a Padawan this time, or a young Jedi. And I was a little bit taken aback because I've read some of the Phase 3 stuff, and Aslan Rel is, a presence here in Phase 3, and that surprised me so much given the little that I knew about him from Phase 2. And so he is trying to discover what happened to our friends Kevmo Zink and Zala McCree, who we talked about in the Path of Deceit novel review that we did a few weeks ago. And basically their death is now known, and it seems like the Jedi are just chalking it up to, oh, yep, it's a really sad thing that happened. Were you surprised at all that the Jedi, it seemed like just kind of threw that one under the rug and didn't say, we're going to launch a full investigation?
I was. Especially concerning the mystery that was around how they died, and nobody even knew anything, and they were just like, oh, well, 2 more down, another one bites the dust.
They're one with the Force now.
Yeah, that's fine. It's, that's that's kind of the mentality they had. And yeah, it was kind of weird, but it felt natural that, from Aslan's point of view, how he's wanting to kind of find out what's going on and what happened and
Mhm.
everything. Um, especially, oh, I'm sorry, had something in my mouth. There's a there's a um story I read. I don't remember where it was. Which one was it that I read? Uh,
This is what
somebody
happens, guys, when you read
when you read
56
so much
issues in
Star
one
Wars
day.
stuff at one time, it all starts crossing over each other. Um,
You're about to hit us with some New Republic story.
no, 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 no. But I remember there being a Jedi. Oh no, I remember reading Red Blade. It was Rise of the Red Blade. I'm there. I got it. I finally clicked it. But everybody kept telling, Escat and Rise of the Red Blade, death is a
Right.
natural part of life. Just rejoice for those. And she's like, what do you mean? What is there to rejoice?
More
And
them do not. Miss
yeah.
them do not.
And so like this story starts with them under the Kyber Arch, which is kind of a cool and yet somewhat morbid kind of memorial for Jedi. You know
Right.
what I mean? That at least I think so.
Right.
They take fallen Jedi's kyber crystals and they have formed this giant arch of crystals
Mhm.
in the temple, and it's kind of a memorial that you can go to kind of honor these fallen Jedi. And Jedi climb on it as like part of their training, like they climb it and stuff. And it's like, okay, that's kind of weird, but yeah, it's kind of weird how they were just like, oh yeah, they're one with the Force now. They're gone. It's okay.
Also, I just now thought of this. I don't know how I haven't thought of this. The Kyber Arch 100% became part of the Death Star, right? Like 100%.
I would that.
How crazy!
I would assume, yeah.
I realized like that 100% was used to fuel the Death Star, right? Like the
Yeah.
Kyber Arch, this symbolic.
Totally canon.
So the like we're making that canon right now. Like
Head
had to
canon,
have
yeah.
been head
You would
canon.
think, yeah, when they plundered the Jedi Temple the way they did,
Yeah,
yeah, you would think.
you would 100% think that, or unless Palpatine's like, actually, no, I would like this memorial of the Jedi to live on, please.
own.
He said he actually made his own. He actually
giant
bled all the crystals.
Yeah.
He bled all the crystals and made a red kyber arch around like his senatorial like office or whatever in the imperial palace.
Oh my god.
That would actually check out a little
Look
bit.
at my red crystals.
Look at my arch.
But yeah, no, I just thought it was kind of
Neoform.
funny that they were standing under this thing like it was just nothing, and
Like, yeah, it's too bad. But it's nothing. It's not nothing for Aslan. So Aslan takes it
right.
very personally, and he's like, "No, we need to get to the bottom of this." And he leaves to go figure this out. And he comes across the adventures of Barnabas Vim, who is a Jedi that's known for, I guess, being the most jacked Jedi of all time. Like this
They
guy
certainly drew him that way.
is just ginormous. Like his muscles have muscles, and his earlobes are
Like if
like
Hugh Jackman was a Jedi,
times
totally.
10.
Times 10, yeah.
Like combine Hugh Jackman and Wolverine with The Rock, and that's like what we have with Barnabas Vim.
He looked like he was modeled after every like 90s Star Wars action figure from Kenner. Like when they were all like the He-Man
They were
status.
yes, like
When I was
he's
surprised
literally the
R2 didn't have
He-Man
a
one.
six-pack, like everybody had a six-pack. Like
Yes. And so he's this giant, and he is called out to the planet of Angkor, who they haven't heard from in a long time. But suddenly there's this little distress going on, and they're going to arrive and try to see what the issue is. But they arrive, and suddenly it's not at all what they were thinking. They're like, this planet really shouldn't be able to support life at all. But there's this thriving little group of islands that is abundant with life, and they arrive, and the is she a queen? Is she like the lady? She's like, I don't really know her title necessarily.
I just referred to her as the queen, like when I was
Yeah.
taking my notes and stuff. So
Okay, so she seems to be the queen, welcomes them in, and soon they realize, okay, these, like her warriors, her little entourage, her guards are super powerful with the force and are able to do things with like projection, like project images in the force and do these things that his Padawan said that, yeah, is anyone capable of doing this? And Barnabas was like, even the most trained Jedi masters at the temple might not be able to perform these levels of force work to this extreme. So you know right away that something trippy is going on here if the greatest, most powerful masters in the temple are kind of even pale in comparison to what's happening here. What did you think when you first saw kind of the forced theatrics at play here?
Yeah, so the first time like they actually show the Jedi how they can use the Force, they basically levitate their queen all
Hmm.
together, and it's kind of this moment where the Jedi are like, "What? Like, what do you what?" And so the entourage is like so, I guess, offended that they were like, "What? Like you don't think you like the Jedi are so arrogant? You think you're the only ones that can do this?"
Hmm.
And so they take them
And
to
the
this large
entourage don't want
arena.
them there at all either.
No, and they take them to this large arena and they show what they can really do with the Force, and they all use the Force to like kick up dust and like to sculpt their queen's face in the dust in front of her, to make this work of art. And that kind of detail, that detail work that's in
Hmm.
there and stuff, that's what he's saying. Not even maybe some of the masters could do it, but not to that level of detail. Like, that's insane.
Hmm.
And so the Jedi are really taken back, and I was like, "Well, this is cool because this is one of the things that I think Disney's really focused on, is that the Jedi aren't the only ones who use the Force. There's
Right.
other sects that do, and
Which
it
we get
was
into
a pleasant
in
surprise.
a lot in phase two.
Yeah.
Like a lot of phase two of the High Republic in this year, where we've talked about it a little bit. We're going to talk about more, especially when we get to Jeddah, is just these different sects of Force users that
Hmm.
exist. And something I particularly like here is that we do see how the Jedi are taken aback by people's ability to use the Force in a way that maybe exceeds their own. And I thought it was interesting. Of course, they're like, there has to be something wrong here. Of course,
Yeah.
there was
Yeah.
something wrong, but
Something
they're like,
unnatural.
if
Yeah.
anyone can use the Force like this, it certainly is not possible, because if we cannot do it, no one can do it.
Hmm.
And so the Queen is the only one that's really open to the Jedi being there, because she's hoping that they can help with like kind of their issues that they're having right now. Their planet seems to be dying, so to speak. It's been supported by life for so long, but they're having some problems now. And the Jedi are like, sure, we'll help you out. We promise we're not going to do anything to disrupt your life here. They're making classic promises that they can't exactly keep, and it's nothing new to the Jedi. And so they take them down to this little cavern where we learn about the Echo Stone. Now, Brian, please enlighten us on the Echo Stone.
So the Echo Stone is this giant kind of purplish crystal that they've got floating in this sanctum, and basically they kind of made a deal with this stone. It emanates force abilities and force power, and they've basically made a pact with it that it would supply their world with this life-giving power, and feed them and keep them warm and have the planet thrive.
Right.
And it's just this crystal, and it's giving them these force powers. It's what's giving them their abilities to levitate their queen and to make this sky art and stuff. And so um it's kicking off something though that uh uh oh, what's his name, Barnabas, that Barnabas is starting to kind of take as dark side energy, and he's trying
Mhm.
to prove to them that this thing could be hurting them more than it is helping. And
Yes, it's taking some of you with it. Like
right,
it's manipulating, it's
draining them,
warping
right.
you, and it's destroying your planet at the same time. What's maybe sustained you for this long, giving you all this, is actually what's going to be your destruction as well, which is interesting. And the Queen's guards did not take kindly to that.
No,
Not at all.
no.
And in fact, a little bit of a battle broke out quite quickly over Barnabas saying, we need to destroy this thing and get it away, because he
Mhm.
realized how much it was affecting the queen as
Right.
well. And so what happens is you see Barnabas and company, they are engaged in this little bit of a battle, and he's like, I have to destroy the Echo Stone. He takes his lightsaber and he slices it in like two pieces, like in half, these two shards.
Mhm.
And what happened was there was an immediate, almost just refresh of the queen's mind. She was almost seeing clearly again. The stone had kind of warped her a little bit. It was almost kind of like, not to the extreme visuals as the two towers from Lord of the Rings when King Theoden's no longer
Right,
under like
right.
Saruman's rule, but it was similar just mentally. She obviously wasn't looking like some hideous witch and then
Right.
suddenly turns into this beautiful queen. No, it was just more of like, she's like, oh my gosh, the cloud has lifted. And she's like, no, we're not going to hurt these Jedi. We're actually thanking them for what they have done for us here. And then the Republic, is going to help them, sustain everything. But what did you think about how the Echo Stone seemed to be hurting her and manipulating the queen and getting everyone to fall in line with what the Echo Stone was wanting?
No, I thought it was cool. They've really been focusing pretty heavily on these Force artifacts, especially in a lot of the High Republic stuff. And it's cool that they came across one of these, and his Padawan, she can't seem to keep her mouth shut at the right times because she's the one
Oh
letting
my
slip
gosh.
everything they're wanting to do, and she's, we came for Force artifacts, and they're like, so you did come to take it, and so
And Barnes is like,
she,
you gotta be kidding me.
just shut up, just sit in the back, just
Do you think that's how Obi-Wan felt sometimes with
oh,
Anakin?
a
Like
hundred
how often do
percent.
you think they were going into
Hundred
something
percent.
and Anakin just went into aggressive negotiations like immediately?
100%. That's why Obi-Wan went gray so fast. That's that's exactly why.
Uh,
Um,
or
but
was
no,
that
this
looking after Luke so long?
yeah, right. Um, but yeah, no, it was it's a pretty cool artifact. And then especially, having already read phase one, we already know kind of what that or I'm sorry, later on in phase two, but in
Right.
phase one also kind of what these shards end up becoming and how important they are later on. Um, always thought it was I thought it was interesting when I read that. It was kind of cool that the Jedi decided also once these shards had been separated that they needed to
Right.
be separated as far as possible away from each other in the galaxy so that nobody would get their hands on them again. And we kind of see how that turned out.
Absolutely. And so what's fun about all of this High Republic stuff too is that I'm just trying to do some like mental jumping in my head too. Is I don't know if you saw, but like they right now have a current release date for the Acolyte. The
Hmm.
Collider dropped it June 5th. And by June 5th, we will be far enough into the timeline show where we're going to be getting close to possibly be able to cover that on a week to week basis
We'll be
in the
close.
timeline show. It's going
We'll
to
be
be
very
close.
close.
And I'm curious to see if there's any ripple effects from these comics we're reading, these books we're reading that make their way into Star Wars television, which
Hmm.
is going to be really fun. And
Yeah.
so basically the Echo Stone, like you said, sorry to have a little side tangent there. I just get
No,
excited
you're good.
anytime we think about the Acolyte. You know what I mean?
And the
We
trailer
we
that we've
talk
never
about that's
gotten.
like anyone that's listened to us at all knows that we are so giddy with excitement for the show that it's gonna be like an almost like a movie release when it comes out for us. But so Barnabas, they have it, the shards cut in half, and these shards are going to become extremely important. Now, for those of us who listen to the Path of the Seat, listen to Path of the Seat, we know that there is a rod called like the Rod of Seasons that
Yep.
helps manipulate and control these nameless creatures. And these shards are what become the two rods that, when connected, give basically complete dominion over the creatures and certain aspects of the Force. And so we don't know which one is which at this time. They're going to separate them and hide them on opposite sides of the galaxy because Barnabas believes it's vital that no one ever has both of them. So whenever one of them is discovered, when we see, on Dalna in, Path the Seat, when they have one, it's a pretty big deal. So what did you think about making that connection to later on where these two rods? This is where the rods are coming from. What did you think about that?
It was nice, and it was very reminiscent of the end of phase one of the High Republic because, and we'll get there eventually, but at the end of phase one, when they don't know what they're doing, the Jedi are at their lowest point. Yoda basically says we need to look to the past to try
Right.
to see if we can figure out what's going on now. And that's the same thing that, this Jedi did, that Aslan did. He looked to the past to try to find
Mhm.
out what was going on at that particular time. And it was a nice parallel. It was a nice rhyming, between the two.
And then they're gonna look to the past, and then they're gonna look to the past, and then suddenly we're right there at Dawn of the Jedi, the movie, 10,000 years and 100,000 years ago, and so that's pretty much like it for the most
Yeah,
part. It
for
sets
that
up a
one.
lot of Aslan Rel's story, which we'll get
Yeah.
into a little bit later in some other comics. It's a really just good one shot. If anyone hasn't read it, I would recommend. It's a few bucks. It's not that expensive,
Mhm.
and it's a fun read, and it's one that you can go back to because it's not like one of those comics where you have to buy the whole arc and you have to keep following the
It's
story for
one
a long
issue.
time.
Yeah.
It's one issue
Yep.
and it's pretty sick. And here's the cover again for those of you on YouTube. It's a pretty sick cover too. I mean, it's pretty cool. And you can see the most jacked Jedi in the history of Star Wars, which is Barnabas Vim. So, Brian, any other final thoughts on Quest of the Jedi one shot or Barnabas Vim's muscles before we move on to the Blade?
They get their own spin-off series. I really like this issue a lot, especially with Claudia Gray.
Barnabas
You
Vim, a workout story, a Star Wars
um
workout story.
I consider Claudia Gray the queen of Star Wars. In my opinion, as far as authors go, she's to me, she's my favorite Star Wars author. And so when I saw she
He
was
sets the
dipping her,
standard often.
yeah, and when she was dipping her toes into the comics, I was like, yes, yes, that's great. And if you're only reading the comics for High Republic, which I don't know what you're
Mhm.
doing if you are, but this is a great kickoff for the
You know,
comic
that would be really
for this
interesting if
phase.
someone was only just reading the comics. Like, I would love to like talk to them. Like, what is
Yeah,
it about comics that keeps you from reading any of the novels? Because I would just be going nuts if I didn't know
right.
like what's all that's going on out there with this timeline. Because if you're reading the High Republic comics, you're pretty deep into Star Wars. But it's
Hmm.
be an interesting gap of like, I'm only a comic person. I don't ever dive into any of the other written stuff. That would be really interesting.
Yeah, it would.
So I know that we are both excited to talk about these next, few
Yes.
comics that we're about to talk about
Yes.
because I don't know about you, Brian, but Porter Ingle, the Blade of Bardata, is like maybe top three, top five Star Wars High Republic character.
Yes.
He's up there. I mean, he is
Agreed.
awesome. And if you want to put the infographic for the
Got it.
Blade here, that would be awesome. So there's 4 issues that came out, and of course, written by Charles Soule, who created this character and has promised me that he will return in other issues in the Broken Blade with Porter Ingle, which is teased at the end. This came out towards the end of the year 2022, again 382 BBY, and there on the front of the cover you see he has kind of this really cool like lightsaber. It's almost like a pirate, you think of
He's
like
got
a
the
classic
guard, the
like
hand
pirate.
guard.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like the little guard, almost like the classic like sword you would think that they fight with. And so he is called the Blade because he is the greatest swordsman, lightsaber swordsman to essentially have ever lived. And I would love to do this is one of those just headcanon things that you would love to like see possible. Like if there could ever be some sort of like AI that is able to create like just lightsaber duels from all eras of Star Wars, takes in every piece of information. Like Porter Ingle might be the last one standing when it
He
comes
very well
into
could,
that.
and being cocky about it too.
Oh
He
my
very
gosh,
well
he
could.
is
I love
cocky
it.
about
I love him.
that
Confident. He's
dude.
confident.
He's so cocky. He is a little arrogant with it at times, but it's
Yes.
it's well it's well founded. It's like any great athlete or someone who is like elite in their field has some level of earned arrogance because they know that
Yeah.
they are great. Like
Yeah.
Michael Jordan knew that he's like when he walked in, like I'm the best. Like I know I'm the best.
Mhm.
Kobe was like that. Like you just have this like level of arrogance that is there but is earned. And one thing I love about Porter Ingle, and this was displayed so many times in these 4 issues, and people who love lightsaber anything will geek out at this,
Yeah.
is that he often will fight with his lightsaber without holding it at
Yeah.
all. Like he's using the force to whip it around his body to deflect things, and he's just using the force, and he's using the force here to push someone while he's also twirling his lightsaber here. Sometimes he doesn't even have his blade in his hand, is what honestly sets him apart for me. I don't know what did you think about that when you first saw um the comic, because obviously it's touched on a little bit when he's fighting in like the Light of the Jedi or something, for
Right.
instance.
Right.
But to
And
see it
you
like in the
hear,
beginning, like the first issue,
yeah,
he's
yeah.
like thwarting these pirates away by just showing them, yeah, I don't even have to pick up this lightsaber to cause some damage with it.
Well, yeah, he's an older character in phase 1, which is where we're introduced to him. and we've heard about, you know, his exploits when he was a little bit younger and everything. And so to see them, it's like, yes. And yeah, he's very arrogant about it. I love reading his dialogue because he's very cocky with it. You know,
He
he has
he's like,
fun
all
with
right, here we
it.
go.
Yeah, he's like, hey boys, you know, like
And it
it's
works
fun.
because he's paired up with how do you pronounce it? Is it
I
Barash?
pronounce it Baresh. Yeah.
Baresh. Okay, so he's
Yeah.
paired with Baresh, who is his sister, I guess, so to
Hmm.
speak. They call himself. She calls him brother. He calls her sister, which
Yes.
was the first time I remember in ever reading the Jedi where we had Jedi refer to each other on that level of familiarity.
Yeah.
Like like
Yeah.
you were my brother Anakin, like, there are things like that where exists, but he's not going up
But
to
not as a
Anakin and being
title.
like,
Right.
yeah, like
Yeah.
brother, like I love you, like brother. And it was more of like we know we are brothers. But this
Yeah.
was like she calls him like his sister, like, she calls him his brother, and they're not like related. They're
Right.
found family where throughout the comic arcs, it does flashback scenes to them at the temple and kind of goes through their relationship. And I'd love to like spend a moment talking about
Yeah.
their
I love it.
background before we talk about the present, because I think it really sets up what their dynamic is.
Yeah.
So I thought it was really fascinating that at the temple, Barish always she struggled with her lightsaber and struggled with Porter, they struggled with that a little bit. She helped him out at the beginning to figure out how to use the lightsaber, how to use all that stuff. And then he helped her out because she felt like she didn't really have friends
Yeah.
or didn't really have anyone. And so they kind of realized, oh, we can help each other out here. And they became inseparable to the point where the council is like, we're going to send you all the way over here and we're going to send you all the way over here because
Yeah.
attachments and all that nonsense.
Hmm.
And what was fascinating is they were like, well, we're going to rig the system and prove that why we should be
Yeah.
together. Like that was hilarious because,
Yeah.
and I want your thoughts on that, is basically they said, okay, we know we're better together. We know we want to spend our time together. And it wasn't even out of a sense of like attachment. Like there's
No,
certainly
like
an
a romantic. It
attachment
wasn't even
there,
a
but
romantic thing. Yeah.
it was just a genuine like we're friends and we want to spend our
Right.
time together, but we also know that my strengths are complement your weaknesses and vice versa.
Yeah.
And so they're like, well, we're going to intentionally sabotage this so they'll be forced to put us back together at some point. What did you think about that? Just the way that they're like, we're no, that's not okay. We're gonna just intentionally be bad so that way when we're together and we complete all these missions, it's gonna be great.
It's the most preteen thing I've ever heard of in my life in Star Wars. Like it was so realistic that that's exactly what two preteens would be like. Well, we're just gonna suck then. We're not gonna give you what you want. We're gonna get what we want. Like it was the most preteen thing I've ever seen, and especially when they get back together because it works. It ends up working. A
Mhm.
couple of years later, they get back together, and the council lets them start working together again. And you don't even know what happened, but she did something on Dantooine that he was just like, especially after what you pulled on Dantooine, she's like, I was just having some fun with it. Like, but they were like, you know, they finally get to work together again. But it's really
Right.
cool the way they complement each other. And especially, you know, it's easier for him to put on a show with his lightsaber than it is for her to put on a show with her abilities,
Mhm.
because you know she's so easy. It's so easy for her to read people and whatnot. But if she's anywhere near as powerful doing that as he is with his lightsaber, she's a force to be reckoned with or without a
Right.
lightsaber. I mean, she is ridiculously powerful.
Mhm.
Um,
She's
and she,
able to her abilities are just much more subtle. Like
yes,
that's why she usually handles the negotiations.
the
She's going out and
intuition,
talking to
yeah,
people
yeah,
and if there's anything that requires a little bit more brash or
right,
muscle, it's like, "All right, Porter, you go take care of that." He's like, "Yes, me, destroy. Let's go."
right.
Um and so their relationship is really unique in Star
Love it,
Wars, and
love
I
it.
think it's important that we highlight that.
Yeah,
And so when we see Porter later on, he is kind of this retired cook, so to speak, and everyone loves eating his stew.
oh
And so I
yeah,
thought that it was hilarious how the comics start with him in the kitchen, and no one likes his cooking at all.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
like horrible. They're like, this is disgusting. He's like, maybe I'll get to it someday. Maybe
Yeah,
I'll
he's
get
like,
better at it
well, that makes sense. I'm not real good at it.
someday.
he just he just accepts it for what it is.
And so they're both these like pathfinders out in the outer rim, and they are basically just going on these random side missions for the Jedi, trying to establish some goodwill out there and also expand, what they know about the outer rim. And they get called into the planet of like Gansavor is how I would say
Yeah.
it, or Gansever, something like that. Gansever. And they go to Firevale, I believe, is the city. And the planet is known as like the planet of knives, just due to like these very thin, like like mountainous like spires that are going up. It's a very interesting planet. And Brian, why don't you explain a little bit of the political tension going on the planet of knives
So
or the city of knives?
the first city they land at, they're actually they queen called for help. I'm assuming she's the queen. That's kind of what I'm gonna
Right,
refer to her as. But she called for help because one of their cities was under siege, and there's these I guess I shouldn't say really two cities. There's this city and there's the rest of the planet, and they're really big on exporting this rare mineral that they have that they use. I don't remember what it was called. It started with a B. It was like, do you remember what it was off the top of your head? What it was called? Because it's something I don't remember what it was called. But anyway, it had a really weird
yeah,
name. Um, but they have this planet under siege, and they're you come to find out that there's this their princess basically got kidnapped.
right,
This they came and kidnapped their princess, and that's why the city's under siege. They're trying to get their princess back, and so it's very tense between the two at the time. And so
right,
the Jedi are trying to figure out what the truth is, which is something Barish is very good at doing, is finding out the truth. And so they go with this, this fleet of supplies that they're going to take for the city that's being
right.
under siege, and they
Like a
get
goodwill
attacked.
mission.
Yeah, they get attacked by the military forces around the city, and the Jedi head down to try to figure out what's going on. And then the more you go through this story, the more and more complex things get, because you're like, oh, that's what's going on. And then you get a little bit further and you're like, oh, well, that's going on too. Okay, well, I'm starting to see it from their point of view, back and forth. So things are very tense between these two sides at this point. Um, and it kind of had a little bit of a feel of convergence, a little bit, with the two
Yes.
sides, trying to, have their romantic relationship from two completely opposite, societies.
So I'm going to upload something real quick
Yeah.
because I this character is introduced. So the planet that is being held, or the city that's being held under siege by these the other rival city, they call in these mercenaries to help them break the siege and take over the planet.
Mm-hmm.
And we are introduced to a villain that at the time I thought was just going to be just a kind of a one-shot villain that was pretty cool, and ultimately it turns into something much bigger than that. I did not have time to make that full screen, but we get General Vice here, and her first words are, "Who am I here to kill?"
Yeah.
And she has like this Beskar armor with her Beskar spear that becomes, she can like break it apart, and it's pretty. She's pretty badass. I'll just say, like, she's pretty badass
Mm-hmm.
villain. And it is really interesting because she is like wants the challenge of taking out these Jedi. She wants, chaos. She wants to destroy. She's not really interested in like finding a peaceful settlement to this at all. She's like, I don't care what happens with your politics. I'm here to mess things up. And so Barish at this point is trying to get to the bottom of the situation because some news comes to light here. And so what does she do? She's like, we need to buy time. They're trying to attack the city. Porter, you go do that. And they're like, what are you doing? Like, we'll never be able to, withstand the strike for this. Oh, no, Porter's out there. He's taking care of it. Like,
It's
it's
fine.
fine. Like, there's an army of mercenaries and a bunch of people. And it's like, yeah, Porter's got it. And it basically shows him like standing by himself and he's just overlooking the army. And he's like, all right. And just jumps down into it like Obi-Wan in
Yeah.
episode 3. Like, hello. And he just has his lightsaber in front of him. He's just like whipping it around, taking people out. They're all trying to fire on him. And then he's like, this is a bad idea. I'm going to give you guys one chance to stop. And he's like, oh, you're not going to take it. All right. Time to have some fun. So talk about one, just what you thought about Porter just jumping off the side of the city into the fray, and then get into like what is this situation going on here with Barish and the prince and the
Yeah.
other princess from the other city.
Oh, yeah. Him fighting these mercenaries is just, it was funny to read. And, his cockiness, because at first he goes down to kind of say, "Hey, what's going on? Pause the attack. We don't want to kill anybody."
Right.
And he's so cocky that this like this military leader's like, "Fine, we'll pause everything." And he's like, "Good. I'm proud of you." Like he's just so cocky, and I love it.
He's like,
Um,
"You made the right call." He's like, "We
it
could kill you right
yeah,
as that's cute. You think that?"
yeah, that's right. So he's down here waiting, for Baresh to figure out what's going on up top, and she decides, she keeps hearing from the queen, of the leader of this city and her son how this princess is feeling, but she's not speaking with the princess herself. So she's like, I want to talk to her, and so she comes in and says, I was trying to be safe here and everything like that, and she finally ends up telling Baresh that she's pregnant and that she wanted to be safe and have her child be safe, because the way it worked on the planet was if the two sides didn't like the fact that there was a middle heir, they would take the child and have somebody else raise them. And
Mhm.
so Baresh is letting that kind of blind her a little bit to what's going on, to a point where she can't really see the whole picture, the whole story of everything.
She got
And about
very, like, emotionally
she did,
connected to it,
she did,
which is normal, but, the Jedi are very, we gotta let our emotions,
right,
be sedated so that way we can analyze the entire situation.
right,
And Baresh also attributes a lot of that to the the stakes being so high due to, like, General Vice trying to take over the city at the
right.
time.
Right. And when she comes into the picture, when she finally decides to fight Porter, she's telling Porter how, the Jedi have come on missions to the Outer Rim and never went back because of me. I killed them. I killed Jedi. And he's like, you may have killed Jedi before, but you've never fought me. And he's just so cocky. And he bests her right off the bat.
Mhm.
I mean, right off
It
the
does
bat.
not take long either.
No, doesn't take anything at all. Just barely puts a little bit of a burn mark on her cheek, just enough to show, hey, I can touch you whether you want me to or not.
Mhm.
Like,
That's
it's
what
up to
was
you.
really awesome. Was he would always inflict his damage, but he would do such a minimal damage, but it
Yeah.
was almost the maximum amount to your ego, so you're like, "Oh," it was like, "He could have taken me out in, like, 2 seconds, but he
Could
chose
have.
not
Yeah.
to." That's just
I
the
love
level
it.
of,
I love
"I
it.
have no chance here, so we gotta get out of here."
Yeah. And
And
the
General
whole
Vice is
time.
gonna hold a bit of a grudge.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Oh
And
yeah.
Porter's
Quite a
gonna
bit.
hold a bit of a grudge due to what happens at the end with Bursch, and I'll let you take that away here for a second.
Sure. Sure. Um, so Baresh there's another flashback in the story also where she's talking to Porter about, I think it was right when they got back together, how her species can remember almost all the way back to birth. She
Right.
remembers her family and her parents and her siblings and everything. And so that's kind of why this is clouding her a little bit, because it's reminding her of herself, and she doesn't
Yes.
want the same thing to happen to this child that's happened to her. And so she finally sees what's actually going on. She hears this princess talking with the commander outside. The whole thing was staged. The whole
Mhm.
siege was staged, everything, so that the two heirs could out his mother and they could take over this
Yep.
particular city to try to get their trade routes opened up to the Republic and everything like that. And so it was this conspiracy against their mother, basically. Um, and once Baresh kind of sees what's going on, she feels very stupid and very foolish for not being able to latch onto it in the first place, just because this whole story kind of reminded her of her
Yeah.
past.
She's like, "How could I not have seen this?" But when it was right in front of my
Yeah.
eyes, and I allowed myself to be clouded by this, and then there's the battle going on outside, and the sad part of the story is how she sees that and she ends up taking this vow of solitude
Yeah.
because she feels as if she can't not control her emotions and reconcile with her past and her own memories, she can't be an effective Jedi here on the Outer Rim. She's a liability to the Jedi. She's a liability to Porter and the missions that they go on.
Hmm.
And so she does separate from her brother. And we find out, hundreds of years later, when Porter's still around, a few hundred years later, that 150 years later, that that was a vow, that was a permanent, that was like a permanent
Yeah.
thing for the most
Yeah.
part. And Porter blames General Vice for this, who does not, who makes another appearance. He blames her because he felt as if she hadn't come in with her mercenary army and really raised the stakes, Barrish would have been able to see through this much quicker
Right.
if there wasn't just this whole battle also taking place outside.
Yeah.
And it separates the two of them like indefinitely, and it's like I was really hoping through the Blade, the 4 issues, I'm like, oh, we're gonna get the Siege of Bardata where he gets his name, and that's what we're gonna do. But no, um, what we see first is how we get to that point where he is at Bardata, because the end
Yeah.
of the novel says we're gonna send you to this place called
Yeah.
Bardata, and it's more about like who Porter Ingle is, what's important to him, and like the first relationships that were formed in his life that kind of set the stage for who he became.
Mm-hmm.
And at the very end of the comic, it says like Porter Ingle will return in the Broken Blade, which
Yeah.
I'm wondering, does Broken Blade mean like he's broken inside a little bit from
That's kind of
Barish
what I'm
leaving,
thinking. Yeah.
and he's gonna like have to reconcile with that? And is there more to the Siege of Bardata than meets the eye? I'm wondering, does he allow himself to, because of that brokenness, to maybe use a little bit more anger than one might assume in that siege,
Yeah.
because he is called the Blade and he knows that, but you don't ever see him with that same level of like cockiness when he's older, or same level of like,
Yeah.
this is what I did. And I wonder, not that he's ashamed of it, but if he's like, I've grown beyond what I did
Right.
before. And I'm curious to see, does that come to like a breaking point? And is
Mm-hmm.
this next one like the breaking point? What do you think?
Right. Yeah, and I think I think you're dead on. As soon as I saw that the title for the next series was, The Broken Blade, that's exactly what it is.
Mhm.
And I'm excited to kind of see what that does to him, how it tempers him a little bit, and because like you said, he's way different 150 years in the future when we see him in phase 1
Right.
of High Republic. And so he's yeah, I think you're dead on. You're on the money.
Anyway, so a fun episode here. Lots of comics. Next week, we're
Yeah.
going to be back talking about the High Republic Adventures, I believe. First 4 issues of the High
First 4
Republic
issues.
Adventures. There's honestly some fun stuff. I guess we'll drop here. If you like Dexter Jester, you might want to tune in next week. If you like
Yeah.
Maz Kanata, you might want to tune in next week. If you like pirates in general, like next week is for you, because
Yeah.
it's basically a bunch of pirates and a Padawan Jedi going on an adventure.
Hmm.
And before we get out of here, Brian, I need to plug something real fast.
Go for it.
I have to. This actually isn't a plug. It's actually me just patting myself on the back and bragging for a minute. So this isn't a plug at all. Before, when the day the Bad Batch trailer dropped, I went on, created a quick 1 minute short, and then gave my 3 predictions for the Bad Batch. And one of my 3 predictions for the season was that Crosshair and Omega would be rescued in the first 3 episodes. Now, they weren't rescued, they escaped. I'm still taking the win on that. I don't know if I told you, I'm taking the win. They got out in the first 3 episodes, which has happened. So I'm 1 for 1. I am almost guaranteeing myself going 3 for 3 on this. I'm almost guaranteeing. My other 2 were that Star Wars fans would be ridiculous over the Dark Disciple book and Ventress's appearance. I can't wait for that to happen, because I know I'm going to go online and just see the
Yeah.
book people go wild. It's like, that's something I
Yeah.
feel like, if anything's a lock, it's Star Wars fans being upset about something.
Yes.
So I
Actually,
feel like I've locked
absolutely.
that one in, and then I am more sure than ever that Tech is going to be like Clone X, like the rogue, like the clone they've warped a little bit to some degree, and he's going to be like a evil clone, cyborg clone for a little bit. Whether or not it's like his mind's actually completely like warped, or if he's just playing along for a little bit, we'll find out. But I'm riding high after that one. I'm riding high after that. And I was upset that you weren't able to join us
I
Thursday
know. I'm
night so I
sorry.
could tell you about this
Yeah.
live, but I'm telling you now.
Yeah. I hadn't seen the episode yet. Um, and didn't really have
Oh,
a
I
chance
hope I
to.
hope I didn't just spoil the Bad Batch
No,
premiere for you.
I still haven't watched it, but I knew you were gonna be dead on about it. I just had a feeling. So,
Well,
but
what's
yeah, I haven't had
crazy
a chance.
though is a
We've
lot of
watched the
people were
first episode.
surprised that they got out so early. And I like people
Yeah.
have seen. A lot of people were saying, and that surprised me. I'm like, how did you? I really couldn't imagine the show being half the season with them in prison. Like, I felt like they would get the band back together for the final season. Anyway,
Yeah.
I didn't realize you had seen it.
No, it's fine. No, you didn't ruin anything for me. You're good.
That's fantastic. Well, a fun episode, lots of
Yeah.
comics. Porter Ingle, the greatest lightsaber man of all time. Berners Vin, the most jacked Jedi of all time. So was like some 2 titans of the Jedi industry this evening. And
Love it.
again, please like and subscribe to the channel wherever you may be watching this. That would be awesome. And if you're wherever you're listening to this, if you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, please drop us a 5-star review. Send us your comments in the chat for what you liked most about the talk today, what you found most interesting about these comics if you have read them. And then if you've read the High Republic Adventures first four and you have some specific things on that you want us to talk about, drop that in. We'll be talking about that next week as well. For Light and Life, Ryan, you got anything going on that you want to plug real quick before we get
No,
out of here?
just my show. We're getting ready to I know I keep saying it. We're getting ready to fire it back up. But been busy with everything going on with Newsnet and everything, trying to get caught up on the canon. So stay tuned. There's big things coming. And make sure to head over, because I'm looking at it right now. Make sure to head over to our website, starwarscanon.net. I got the timeline all finished out there, and it's broken down by era, so you guys can find it pretty easily. And there's going to be some upgrades coming to the website, especially to the timeline. Right now, it's just a list that's kind of color coded by medium. But there's going to be some upgrades coming where everything's going to be its own link. And if you're interested in like trying to find where you can purchase that particular piece of canon or download it or whatever, you can click on it and it'll have all the links available. So it's a one-stop thing where you can go and just, if you want to find something, you
Yes.
know
And that's so
exactly what
helpful
order
with
it goes into and where to go
books.
to get it.
That's
Yeah.
so helpful with books and comics. Like it because it's easy to find like movies, shows, like go to Disney Plus, go here. But
Right.
some of those like really like the comics that are just hard, it's hard to find like where those are. Sometimes it can be
Yeah.
confusing because there's so many. So like that's a great resource.
Cool.
Anyway, but that'll wrap it up for us. Until
Yeah.
next time for Light and Life, everyone.